the tampon tax is a sales tax on period products, considering them non-essential goods.
Which, what the
Meanwhile, and this is where it goes back to like cis men being lawmakers.
Right.
So meanwhile, products like Rogaine and Viagra, older male hair growth and erections, you know, are considered necessities and don't have that tax. Yeah.
We're going to just dive right into it.
Let's do it.
Can you define period poverty for our audience and tell us a bit about what that means?
Yeah. So period poverty is just not being able to afford access to period products. And so basically anybody who's struggling to afford basic necessities and having to make those choices on how you're spending each and every dollar on basic necessities are likely having to experience period poverty because period products are definitely a necessity.
Yeah, so you're probably experiencing poverty in other aspects of your life, right?
Absolutely. Like it does not exist in a silo at all.
Right. So this is one issue of many on top of, a lot of different financial issues for an individual.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of times when people hear of period poverty, they often think like, oh, this must affect a very small subset of people.
Right.
Like in what condition? Like I get asked a lot, well, where would you actually find period poverty that exists, right? But I think it actually comes from the misunderstanding that menstrual health is a necessity and not just something like some people can choose to elect to want, right? When in reality, like this is intertwined with, again, being in a place where you're struggling financially. And so that's why when you look at statistics of like where poverty exists, obviously that's where period poverty is going to exist.
Yeah.
So as, you know, women and children are the fastest growing population of people experiencing poverty, that means period poverty is also being exacerbated at the same rate.
Right.
So very much goes in hand.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this later, but when you have lawmakers who are not menstruators, who
Exactly.
are largely straight white dudes.
Yeah.
I want to do, like, and you're probably the person to do this, like, I don't think men understand, like, what happens when you have your period.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think they get it. I think they think maybe it's like you got a paper cut and that's how much blood there is. I'm like,
yeah.
I want you to understand for just one time what it's like to menstruate.
I don't even think a lot of menstruators understand.
That's true. It's a good point. Yeah.
I think that like we are all so in the dark of even what's happening inside of our own bodies.
Yeah.
But yes, 100%. People who don't get a period in a culture where it's not an open conversation are totally in the dark.
And those are the ones making the laws and deciding what
For
gets
the most
taxed and what. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, good point, because I think we as menstruators were told to this is just another day and you just got to suck it up and you got to shove some cotton up your and just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
As opposed to, really understanding what it means to menstruate.
Exactly.
Let's talk a bit about your background. So period poverty became a passion of yours. I will read your resume up top, but girl, okay. Ran for office at 19, started a nonprofit at 16. Like, was this something that you were passionate about from a young age?
No, so I got my period at 12, but I think I became passionate about period poverty when I was 16 and started the nonprofit like a few months later.
Was there like a specific moment or a catalyst for that?
I think it was just hearing about period poverty. Like it was at a time when my family was experiencing financial and housing instability. Yeah. And so while I wasn't necessarily experiencing period poverty, we were experiencing like being low income, being in a place in our lives when we were thinking about what were basic necessities, affording food, affording housing, and things like that. Safety. Right. And so I think that it was a time when, in my mind, in my own life, I was obsessing over like what are those basic necessities when you are like struck in a literal scarcity mindset, right? What are you like, affording?
This or that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I was interacting with a lot more homeless women through my commute to school, and which ended up being a lot longer, and started hearing about period poverty, literally using cardboard to take care of their periods. And they would like show me the makeshift pads and like how they dealt with it. And
what did that look like? Can you tell us what that looked like?
So the cardboard to me was like the most visible thing that always sticks with me, and it was basically taking off the outer layer of the cardboard for the corrugated ridges on the inside, and then you rub it between your hands to make it as a pad. Similarly, like like kind of twisting up a plastic bag, like folding up paper grocery bags, right? The brown paper grocery bags,
right?
And I think that just hearing those stories of what you do when you don't have access to period care or always access to a bathroom or access to clean underwear or other changes of clothes. So I think that for me, it was like a huge eye-opener, and it was a turning point because as soon as I heard it, I was like, wait, how have I never thought about this before? Even in this situation that I'm in, how have I not heard of this before?
Right.
And so for me, I think it was like a big privilege check at a time when like I was honestly thinking of myself as more disadvantaged than privileged, and then it was like realizing, oh wow, even when my family's in this time, I have not had to worry about this, you know?
Right. Well, even just talking to you, like I'm sitting here going like periods suck for me, and I have clean underwear and a shower, and you know that moment where you like get off a plane and you're like, I feel disgusting.
Exactly, yeah.
Like that's me for 6 hours every once in a while.
Yeah.
Like what does that feel like every single month for potentially a week?
Yeah, and I think that you know, I think it was just an eye opener that I became I very quickly became very obsessed with, like something I was staying up at night researching on Google and learning about the Tampon Tax, which was in 40 states in the US at the time in 2014.
For those who don't know, can you tell us what the Tampon Tax is?
So the Tampon Tax is a sales tax on period products, considering them non-essential goods.
Which, what the
Yeah. Meanwhile, and this is where it goes back to like cis men being lawmakers.
Right.
So meanwhile, products like Rogaine and Viagra, older male hair growth and erections, you know, are considered necessities and don't have that tax. Yeah. So it was learning about things like that, or the fact that like food stamps don't cover period products as necessities.
Right.
And it's a leading cause of absenteeism for girls around the world. And so it was honestly a very fast, you know, I don't want to, it wasn't falling in love. It was like becoming so overly consumed by this obsession of like, what is this issue? And I started researching like organizations to volunteer with. Like, what organizations can I volunteer with as a 16-year-old? And I just couldn't find any that were like talking about period poverty, like in my area in Portland, Oregon, or nationally, really focused on the U.S. So,
well, how old are you now? That would have been what year?
2014. So I'm 24 now.
Okay.
So I'm 8 years in.
Yeah.
Like, I'm 8 years into this career, which is so crazy because when I started my nonprofit, and I think a lot of people think that I started this nonprofit and I was like gonna make it into my career, but like I did not know you could get paid for doing this type of work. Like, for the first 3 years, it was volunteer. Like, the idea of this becoming a career was not something I was thinking about.
Yeah.
Like, to me, I was starting this as like being really passionate about it. And
that's just, you didn't know that that was a potential.
Yeah, I just didn't know.
Yeah.
Like, well, and also, at the time, I was really interested in becoming like a public defender, and like that's what I wanted to be. And I had this whole game plan of like going to law school. I wanted to be a public defender. I really wanted to go into politics of some sort. At one point I wanted to be like an obstetric surgeon because I loved Addison, Montgomery, and Grey's Anatomy in private practice. So like there are things like that where I didn't think of this as a career path.
Yeah.
But here I am.
It didn't even seem like an option.
8 years in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
So crazy.
Can we go back to the tampon tax really quick?
Yeah.
How many states is it currently in?
27. So we're making a lot of progress.
Right.
But it's still the majority of U.S. states. And I think what puts it into perspective for me is that this has existed in other countries and been nationally taken down. India, Australia, Scotland, the UK. The UK repurposed their tax revenue to address period poverty, right? Like, there are other countries, like the US is very far behind. And so I think
that's not shocking.
Yeah, not shocking. But I think it's interesting because it's like, I always say the number, yeah, we've gone from 40 to 27, but like, I do think that we totally have the right to expect a lot more than that, you know? So
I imagine those 27 states, I shouldn't assume. Let me ask, where are those 27 states largely?
It's actually really surprising because I think a lot of people assume that it's like, oh, it'll be the more conservative ones like Texas and Florida.
Yeah.
But Florida was one of the recent ones to take it down, you know? And so I think that if you actually look at the list, and there are states that have made some progress, like California, they didn't take it down. They put a suspension on it for 2 years, right? Yeah, so like really weird. Yeah. So it's like progress, but like we got to keep an eye on it. But I think the most fascinating thing about it.
Why suspend it? Like.
Well, so I think one of the biggest conversations I get into, like when I have talked to lawmakers about the tampon tax, is about the revenue, right? This is not a small amount of revenue. It may be a small amount of revenue in the context of like the overall, of course, like, you know, billions or millions of dollars of their
spent on
state
beauty
budget.
or
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
However, like this is a commodity product that every menstruator is likely having to purchase. It's a tax that ranges from 6 to 14%. So it does add up, right?
And this is on top of the amount you're paying for something
for the period products,
right?
Yes. So like this is a revenue stream in some way for the government. So the conversation is,
maybe this is my own stupidity. How does the government make money off of private company, or is it them getting taxed?
So it's
right?
a sales tax.
Yeah, okay.
Total sales
Got
tax.
It. Okay.
And so it's just a sales tax levied on these products, essentially.
Got it. So if you're like Always or Tampax, like you're not seeing this money, it's going directly to the government.
Yes. Yeah. It is like a tax that is literally, you know, when you like check out at CVS,
right,
and it's like, oh, I thought it was $10, it's $13, you know, things like that.
Unless you live in Oregon.
Unless you live in Oregon, yeah, which I definitely took for granted.
It's so nice.
So nice.
Yeah, we were went to college in Portland. It was so nice to be able to roll up and just be like, price is actually what I'm going to pay.
Iconic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, when you get into these conversations about how do you make up the revenue, it's like, oh, but so we could increase it on tobacco and alcohol. But there's pushback there because the lobbying groups of tobacco and alcohol are much bigger than the advocates behind the tampon tax.
Right.
You know? So it's a constant fight, and I've been really inspired though by all the conversation that's been happening about it. But yeah.
Take it from the military, take it from the police budget. That's where I'm like, okay, why?